The Persian Gulf is naturally quiet. Dawn breaks slowly over the steel-gray water, painting the horizon in pale orange. The air smells of salt, diesel, and tension. On the flight deck of the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72, sailors move in practiced silence. Petty Officer Daniel Carter tightens the straps on his life vest. He is 27 years old, born in Ohio, 8 years in the Navy, long enough to recognize the difference between routine patrol and the kind of silence that comes before something much worse. Above him, an F-180 Super Hornet screams down the deck and launches into the brightening sky. The jet disappears toward the north, toward Strait of Hormuz, the narrow artery where nearly a third of the world's oil passes every day. Daniel watches it vanish. Nobody talks much this morning. Rumors have been spreading across the fleet for days. Iranian missile batteries mobilized along the coast. Revolutionary Guard fast boats moving at night. Satellites detecting something unusual near Bandar Abbas. War doesn't usually start with explosions. It starts with silence. Radar contact. Multiple fast movers. Someone calls from the island tower. Daniel looks toward the dark blue line of the Iranian coastline. Barely visible through the morning haze, the radio on his vest crackles. Unknown vessels leaving harbor. The Gulf suddenly feels smaller. Across the water, inside the command bunker beneath the cliffs of Bandar Abbas, Reza Farhadi studies a glowing radar screen. 29 years old. Naval officer in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. He hasn't slept in 30 hours. Small, green dots move across the radar, speedboats loaded with rockets and machine guns. Dozens of them. Swarm tactics. Cheap, fast, deadly. His commander speaks quietly behind him. Today the Americans learn the strait is not theirs. Reza swallows. He knows what will happen next. Once the first missile flies, there will be no turning back. Out on the carrier deck, Daniel hears a different sound. Not jets. Sirens. The sharp metallic wail cuts across the ship. General quarters. General quarters. All hands man your battle stations. Sailors begin running. The war everyone feared might be starting right now. Daniel grabs his helmet and sprints toward the weapons elevator. Behind him, another Super Hornet roars off the deck, but this time, it launches armed. Across the water, hidden among fishing boats and all tankers, Iranian fast attack craft accelerate toward the narrow throat of the Strait of Hormuz. On radar screens, the distance closes. 30 miles. 20. 15. Then a radar operator shouts something that freezes the entire combat information center. Missile launch detected. For a single moment, no one moves. Then the alarm changes. Incoming. The alarm howls through every steel corridor of USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72. Daniel Carter is halfway down the ladder, when the ship suddenly tilts. Beneath his boots, not from impact, not yet, but from the violent maneuver of 100,000 tons of steel, turning hard into the wind. Someone above shouts, "Missile inbound." Daniel bursts onto the weapons deck. Sailors are already moving fast, dragging ammunition carts and locking equipment into place. The air smells like hydraulic fluid and nervous sweat. On the radar screens inside Combat Information Center, a glowing icon streaks across the Persian Gulf. Speed, Mach 2. Distance, 70 miles. Confirmed launch from Iranian coast, the tactical officer says. Likely no anti-ship missile. The missile is sea-skimming, flying just above the waves, nearly invisible to radar until the last minutes. Outside, the carrier's defense systems come alive. A white dome rotates, tracking. Then suddenly, the phalanx CIWS gun swivels toward the horizon like a mechanical predator waking up. Daniel hears the command through the ship-wide speakers. Weapons free. At that exact moment, 70 miles away along the cliffs outside Bandar Abbas, Reza Farhadi watches the missile launch plume fade into the pale sky. His hands tremble slightly. He had pressed the authorization key, not fired at himself, but close enough. Around him, other officers track American warships on glowing monitors. The room hums with computers and tension. Impact in for minutes, someone says. Reza nods silently. He tells himself the Americans would have struck first eventually, but the thought doesn't make it easier. Out on the open Gulf, the missile races forward like a metal spear, 10 meters above the water. Too low for most radars, too fast for hesitation. Back aboard the carrier, Daniel finally reaches his station. The ship's loudspeakers bark new commands. Brace for engagement. Another radar operator shouts. Multiple contacts detected. Fast boats leaving the Iranian coast. The tactical officer swears under his breath. This isn't just a missile attack. It's the beginning of a swarm. Through the gray morning haze, Lookout sailors spot them first, dozens of dark shapes bouncing across the waves. Iranian fast attack craft, rocket launchers mounted on their decks, machine guns pointed toward the American fleet. The distance closes rapidly. Inside the Combat Information Center, a final warning flashes red. Missile range, 12 miles. Daniel grips the metal railing beside him. Somewhere outside, the phalanx gun suddenly erupts. A violent thunder of 20mm rounds, thousands of bullets per minute. The carrier's last shield against the incoming missile. But the radar officer's voice cracks over the speakers. Second missile launch detected. Then a third, and a fourth. The war has begun. The sky over the Persian Gulf explodes with tracer fire. On the forward deck of USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72, Petty Officer Daniel Carter grips the railing as the ship's phalanx CIWS unleashes a storm of bullets into the morning haze, 6,000 rounds per minute. A metal scream that vibrates through the entire carrier. Far out over the water, something flashes. Then, a fireball erupts in the sky. The first incoming NOR anti-ship missile disintegrates under the barrage, fragments scattering into the sea below. For half a second, the sailors on deck cheer. Then the radar operator's voice cuts through the noise. 3 more inbound. The celebration dies instantly. Daniel looks toward the horizon. The ocean is alive with movement now. Dark spakes bounce across the waves. Dozens of Iranian fast attack boats from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Navy, their engines howl as they charge toward the American carrier group. Swarm tactics, cheap boats, heavy weapons, overwhelming numbers. Some carry rocket pods, others tow small missile launchers. They spread out like wolves surrounding prey. Above them, the second missile appears. It rises briefly over the horizon before diving low again, skimming the waves at terrifying speed. Inside the Combat Information Center, tension turns electric. Missile at 8 miles, track locked. Engage. Another phalanx gun erupts from the carrier's port side. Twin storms of tracer rounds rip across the sea. The sky fills with glowing lines of fire. Daniel watches as the missile cuts through them, still coming. Closer, closer. Then suddenly, a streak of smoke shoots upward from the destroyer escorting the carrier. The USS Farragut DDG-99 has fired. The interceptor missile climbs sharply before slamming into the incoming NOR missile. The explosion lights up the entire Gulf. Shockwaves ripple across the water. But the radar screen shows something worse. Another missile is already inside 5 miles. Inside the Iranian command bunker near Bandar Abbas, Reza Farhadi leans forward, heart pounding. The first 2 missiles failed, but the third might reach them. An officer whispers beside him, "If it hits the carrier." Reza doesn't answer. On the American flight deck, Daniel suddenly hears a new sound. Jets. 2 armed F-180 Super Hornet fighters roar back toward the carrier group, loaded with missiles. They streak low across the water toward the approaching Iranian boats. But before the jets can strike, the third missile appears through the fog. Too close, too fast. Daniel sees the white shape tearing across the waves straight toward the carrier. The phalanx guns fire again. The sky erupts with bullets, and for one terrifying second, it looks like the missile is going to hit. The missile comes in low over the water, barely 10 meters above the waves. On the deck of USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72, Petty Officer Daniel Carter sees it now with his own eyes. A thin white spear racing across the gray surface of the Persian Gulf. Too fast, too close. The phalanx CIWS guns roar again, spitting thousands of rounds into the air. The tracers slice across the sky like burning threads. But the missile keeps coming. Inside the Combat Information Center, someone shouts. Impact in for seconds. Daniel feels his throat tighten. 3 seconds. The missile rises slightly over a wave crest. 2 seconds. Then suddenly, a violent burst of sparks erupts along its side. The phalanx finally hits it. The missile veers wildly, its guidance system shattered. It slams into the ocean barely 300 meters from the carrier. The explosion sends a tower of water into the sky. The shockwave thunders across the deck. Daniel staggers but stays on his feet. For a moment, the crew breathes again. But the battle is only beginning. Across the water, dozens of fast attack craft from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Navy surge forward. Now they are close enough to see clearly. Narrow hulls, heavy machine guns mounted on rotating frames, rocket launchers bolted to the decks. They spread out in a wide arc around the American fleet. Swarm formation. Their goal is simple: overwhelm the defenses. Inside the Iranian command bunker near Bandar Abbas, Reza Farhadi watches the radar screen with growing tension. The missiles failed, but the boats are still advancing. Range to target, 12 miles, an operator reports. Rizal nods slowly. At that distance, rockets can still reach the American ships. Outside, the engines of the fast boats scream across the water. Back on the American carrier, a new sound cuts through the chaos. Jet engines, two A-180 Super Hornet fighters streak low over the waves. Afterburners glowing bright orange. Their pilots see the swarm immediately. Multiple hostile craft confirmed. One pilot radios. Missiles lock onto the clustered boats. Within seconds, the first AGM-65 Maverick missile launches from beneath the jet's wing. It streaks downward and slams into the lead Iranian boat. The explosion rips the vessel apart. Flames spread across the water. But the rest of the swarm keeps coming. More than 40 boats now. Too many for just 2 jets. On the deck beside Daniel, sailors begin loading ammunition into a mounted M2 Browning machine gun. The boats are closing fast. 7 miles. 6. Through the smoke and glare, Daniel suddenly notices something else approaching from the north. Larger shapes, warships. The radar operator's voice breaks through the speakers again. Multiple unidentified surface contacts entering the Gulf. The tactical officer stares at the screen. Then his face tightens. Those ships are not American. The sea around USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72 has turned into a battlefield. Smoke drifts across the water. Burning fuel stains the waves where the first Iranian boats were destroyed. But the swarm from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy keeps advancing. Petty Officer Daniel Carter kneels behind the mounted M2 Browning machine gun on the carrier's defensive platform. His headset crackles with overlapping voices. Enemy craft at 5 miles. Air support engaging. Stand by for rocket fire. Daniel squints across the blinding glare of the morning sun, reflecting off the Persian Gulf. The Iranian boats are close enough now that he can see the crews. Men in dark uniforms, faces hidden behind scarves and goggles. One of the boats fires first. A streak of smoke launches from its deck, a rocket racing toward the American fleet. The rocket misses the carrier by hundreds of meters, slamming into the water with a dull explosion. But dozens more boats begin firing. The sky fills with smoke trails. Back overhead, the 2 A-180 Super Hornet fighters dive again. Fox 2. Another missile launches. The AGM-65 Maverick slams into a cluster of boats. The explosion flips one craft completely over, throwing debris across the water. Still the swarm spreads wider. They are trying to surround the American ships. Inside the command bunker near Bandar Abbas, Riza Farhadi watches the unfolding battle with growing unease. The Americans are reacting faster than expected. Carrier aircraft, missile defense, coordinated response. But then one of the radar operators points at a new group of contacts approaching the Gulf. Large ships. Riza studies the identification codes carefully. They are not Iranian, and they are not American either. Who are they? Someone asked quietly. Riza recognizes the configuration immediately. Destroyers. Heavy radar signatures. Ships belonging to the Russian Navy. The room falls silent. Back aboard the American carrier, Daniel hears the same report moments later. Unidentified warships entering from the north. The tactical officer studies the radar screen. 4 ships, moving fast, heading straight toward the battle zone near the Strait of Hormuz. Daniel reloads the ammunition belt into the Browning machine gun as another Iranian boat explodes under missile fire. His mind races. Russian warships. Here, now. On the carrier's command deck, the captain finally gives a new order. Alert the entire fleet. He pauses for a moment before finishing the sentence. We may not be fighting only Iran. At that exact moment, one of the approaching Russian destroyers suddenly changes course. Its missile launch hatches begin to open. The radar screens inside USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-7 to glow with new symbols for large surface contacts. Closing fast. Petty Officer Daniel Carter hears the report through the ship's loudspeakers while feeding another ammunition belt into the M2 Browning machine gun. Unknown warships entering combat zone. Possible Russian Navy vessels. The words hang in the air like a storm cloud. Daniel glances toward the northern horizon. Through drifting smoke and sea haze, dark shapes emerge. Large ships, much larger than the Iranian boats swarming across the Persian Gulf. Destroyers. Their silhouettes are unmistakable. On the command bridge of the carrier, officers study the incoming radar data carefully. Electronic signatures confirm the worst suspicion. The ships belong to the Russian Navy, likely part of a patrol squadron that had been operating in the region. But why are they moving directly toward the battle? Inside the Iranian command bunker near Bandar Abbas, Riza Farhadi stares at the radar screen with disbelief. He had been informed Russian vessels were nearby in the Gulf for observation. No one had said they might intervene. Signal them, his commander orders. Tell them Iranian forces are engaged with American ships. A communications officer sends the message immediately. Seconds pass. No response. Out on the open water, the swarm of Iranian fast attack craft continues its assault. Rockets streak across the waves. One detonates dangerously close to the escort destroyer, USS Farragut DDG-99, sending a column of water high into the air. In response, the destroyer's deck erupts with fire. The Mark 45 naval gun thunders. Shells slam into the attacking boats, tearing them apart in violent flashes of orange flame. But new boats keep coming. Above the battlefield, two F-180 Super Hornet fighters roar across the sky again, missiles streaking downward into the swarm. Explosions ripple across the water. Then suddenly, the radar operator aboard the American carrier shouts, "Russian ships activating fire control radar." The room goes silent. That system is only used when preparing weapons. Daniel hears the message seconds later through his headset. His hands freeze on the machine gun. Across the smoky horizon, the nearest Russian destroyer turns broadside to the battle. Its vertical launch cells begin to open, one by one. Back in the bunker at Bandar Abbas, Reza Farhadi whispers something under his breath. If Russia fires, this will no longer be a regional war. It will be something much bigger. On the deck of the carrier, Daniel watches the distant destroyer through binoculars. A bright flash erupts from its bow. A missile launches into the sky, but it is not flying toward the Americans. The missile arcs sharply, then plunges directly into the swarm of Iranian attack boats. The missile from the Russian destroyer tears through the sky like a falling star. Seconds later, it slams into the middle of the Iranian swarm in the Persian Gulf. The explosion is enormous. A towering fireball erupts across the water, swallowing 3 fast attack boats from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Navy in a single violent blast. Shattered hulls flip into the air. Burning fuel spreads across the waves. For a moment, everyone watching the battle is stunned. On the deck of USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72, Petty Officer Daniel Carter lowers his binoculars slowly. "Did they just help us?" One sailor mutters. No one answers. Inside the Combat Information Center, confusion spreads across the radar consoles. The Russian ships are not targeting American vessels. Instead, their sensors now track the remaining Iranian boats racing toward the American carrier group. Another missile launches from the lead destroyer. This time the trail is visible for miles. Back in the command bunker beneath the cliffs of Bandar Abbas, Reza Farhadi stares in disbelief. "That's impossible," one officer whispers. Russian forces had been friendly observers in the region for years, but now their weapons are striking Iranian boats. Reza's commander slams his hand against the console. "Contact them again." The communications officer sends an urgent signal toward the approaching warships. Seconds later, a reply finally arrives. The message is short, cold, unmistakable. Russian forces will secure navigation in the Strait of Hormuz and prevent escalation threatening global shipping. Reza exhales slowly. Translation: they will stop anyone who threatens the oil corridor, including Iran. Out on the battlefield, the situation changes rapidly, with missiles from above and gunfire from the American destroyer, USS Farragut DDG-99. The remaining Iranian swarm begins to scatter. Some boats turn back toward the Iranian coast. Others continue firing rockets in desperation. Above the chaos, 2 F-180 Super Hornet fighters sweep low across the water again. Their cannons flash. More boats explode. Daniel wipes sweat from his face, adrenaline still pounding in his ears. The carrier has survived the first wave, but then the radar operator shouts something new. Large launch detected from Iranian mainland. Everyone inside the Combat Information Center freezes. This time the radar signature is different. Bigger. Much bigger. Back in the bunker near Bandar Abbas, Reza Farhadi sees the same signal appear on the screen. The icon is unmistakable. Iran has just launched a Shahab-3 missile, a ballistic missile, and its trajectory is heading directly toward the center of the Gulf, where the American carrier group and the Russian destroyers are now operating side by side. Inside the Combat Information Center of USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72, the radar screen suddenly changes. A new track appears high above the Persian Gulf, not sea-skimming, not low and fast like the earlier missiles. This one climbs almost straight upward into the sky. "Ballistic launch confirmed," the radar officer says quietly. The room falls silent. The computer identifies the weapon within seconds. Shahab-3 missile. Range: over 1,000 kilometers. Payload, capable of destroying a large warship with a single strike. Petty Officer Daniel Carter hears the report through his headset, while still gripping the M2 Browning machine gun on the carrier deck. A ballistic missile is different from everything they have faced so far. It comes from space, it falls almost vertically, and it hits with terrifying speed. Across the battlefield, the 4 destroyers of the Russian Navy detect the launch as well. Their radar dishes rotate sharply. Missile defense systems activate. The Gulf is suddenly holding its breath. Inside the Iranian bunker near Bandar Abbas, Reza Farhadi watches the missile's trajectory appear on the tactical display. He hadn't been told about this launch. Neither had most of the officers in the room. That means the order came from far above them. Strategic Command. The target prediction line glows red across the screen. Impact zone, Central Strait of Hormuz, directly over the battle. If the missile hits the American carrier group, the war will explode overnight. But if it lands near the Russian ships, the consequences could be even worse. Back on the American carrier, alarms begin sounding again. Ballistic missile inbound. The USS Farragut DDG-99 immediately launches a defensive interceptor. SM-3 missile roars into the sky, leaving a brilliant white trail. Moments later, one of the Russian destroyers launches its own interceptor as well. 2 missiles climbing toward the same target. 2 rival navies trying to stop the same threat. High above the Earth, the Shahab-3 begins its descent. Its warhead separates and plunges downward at hypersonic speed. Inside the Combat Information Center, the intercept countdown begins. 30 seconds to engagement. Daniel stares up at the sky. He cannot see the missile, only the thin white streaks of the interceptors racing upward. 20 seconds. The entire carrier group watches the sky. American sailors, Russian sailors, even Iranian radar operators. Everyone waiting for the same outcome. 10 seconds. The radar officer's voice trembles. Intercept window opening. Then suddenly, a blinding flash erupts high above the clouds. The explosion lights up the sky like a second sun. For a moment, no one speaks. Then the radar operator shouts again. Warhead destroyed. Relief spreads through the fleet. But seconds later another message arrives from long-range radar. And this one is far worse. Multiple ballistic launches detected from inland Iran. The morning haze over the Persian Gulf has become a battlefield of fire, smoke, and chaos. Petty Officer Daniel Carter kneels on the deck of USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72, hands raw from gripping the M2 Browning machine gun, eyes darting across the horizon. The remnants of the Iranian fast attack boats float like burning debris, the ocean littered with twisted metal and fuel slicks. Yet the real danger looms far above. Long-range radar detects multiple ballistic missiles arcing high into the sky, each one a potential disaster, each one a test of survival. The SM-3 interceptors roar from the American destroyers, joined by Russian countermeasures. Each missile that explodes above the Gulf saves lives, but the air is thick with tension. One failure could wipe out the carrier. One miscalculation could ignite a global confrontation. Daniel's headset crackles again. The voice is tight with urgency. New launches detected. Coordinates, multiple. Trajectories, unknown. He swallows, adrenaline spiking. The calm he had relied on for years has evaporated in smoke and fire. Every decision, every action, is now life or death, not just for him, but for thousands aboard the fleet. Out on the water, the Russian destroyers maintain their defensive posture. Their crews are tense, silent professionals, weapons ready. The Americans are doing the same. 2 navies side by side, defending against the same threat from Iran, each aware of how easily miscommunication could escalate into full-scale war. Meanwhile, far inland, Reza Farhadi watches another series of launches from Iranian silos. The men around him are pale, realizing the scope of what has been unleashed. Some look at the radar screens in disbelief. Others close their eyes and pray. Back on the carrier, Daniel catches his first real glimpse of human faces on the Iranian boats before they were destroyed. Young men, no older than he is, shouting orders over engine noise, unaware of how quickly the Gulf has turned into their grave. A flash of pity crosses Daniel's mind, quickly suppressed by the roar of gunfire and alarms. Then, suddenly, the horizon changes. Smoke rises from more than a dozen remaining Iranian vessels. The swarm is broken. The combined firepower of the American and Russian fleets, coupled with precise aerial strikes, has destroyed the threat. The missiles in the air are neutralized by coordinated interceptors. The silence that follows is eerie. Daniel leans against the railing, breathing heavily, his hands shaking. For the first time, he allows himself to think about the magnitude of what they just survived. Reza Farhadi, staring at the fading blips on his radar, feels a chill of realization. Iran had pushed too far. The Gulf and perhaps the world has been forever changed. But even in this fragile calm, Daniel knows it is only temporary. The missiles may be gone, the boats destroyed, but the political storm, the global stakes, are just beginning.